Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to talk through this process that Claire and I use to help companies get more signups without adding, more marketing into the big mix and spending on more marketing. So I'll just get right into it here. So in general, I would say we're leads obsessed just across the board. This is definitely the number one reason why people reach out to our team for help. But 90% of the time, what we actually discover is that top of funnel or leads is not actually the solution to their problem. In fact, 90% of the time, we find that websites' traffic volume is okay and even relatively healthy. But where things start to, fall apart, so to speak, is that once people get to the website and they sign up for your product, that's really where things start to break down. So my goal is to help you figure out of all of the opportunities you could pursue right now to grow revenue, is more traffic, more leads really your biggest opportunity? Or is there actually a hidden breakdown further in your customer's experience where you should be spending your time? Because once you know that, you can make way more informed decisions about where to invest on the marketing side of things and how to invest your marketing resources, and feel a lot more confident that in the investment bets that you do make. So I don't actually need to introduce myself because Rob did such a great job. So I'll just breeze right on through to this one. This is Claire, who Rob mentioned. Claire and I co-founded Forget the Funnel together. We are on a mission to abolish two things: useless customer research and also generic or like spaghetti at the wall style growth tactics. We really, really hate both of those things. Claire has deep expertise on the research side of things, and my MO is taking that research and turning it into revenue opportunities for companies. And these are some of the companies that we've worked with. So to tell you the story and basically walk through this process of how you can get more signups, we're going to use an example, a case study, if you will. The company is called LifeLapse. They're going to basically, they're my tool to help you sort of understand and walk through the process. It's not really all that important what they do, but effectively they are a tool that allows you to create stop motion videos on your phone. At the time that we started working with them, they had a few thousand free users and paying customers. The problem or the opportunity at the time is that the CEO wanted to begin targeting B2B users rather than purely, B2C, who had been attracted to LifeLapse so far. The hypothesis there was that there would be greater LTV, and the CEO's assumption really was we need a really effective sort of PR strategy, or we need to find influencers to partner with. So I'm going to skip right to the end of this, and I'm going to tell you right now what the result was in working with them. We were able to help the team increase signups by 93%. I'm going to walk you through the process that we used to do that, which is effectively this. But before we dig into exactly this process, I do want to sort of make it clear that the process that I'm going to run through is actually going to be most useful and most applicable to those of you who already have established demand for your product, so happily paying customers. It is not as useful for pre-launch products or products rather that don't have paying customers. It requires a slightly different approach. It's very related. You still can still get a ton of value out of this process, but we can talk about that maybe more at the end if that's your situation. There's some specifics to actually executing and implementing this type of stuff that I'm happy to dive into the details. But in an effort to actually get all this information passed on to you in 20 minutes, I'm going to breeze right past that and we can come back to it. So again, this process, getting more signups without more marketing, we'll just dive right into starting with identifying who we need to learn from. So who should we be learning from in order to get the answer to this question of where we should be focused in terms of marketing and revenue growth opportunities? And not all customers are created equally. And in order to learn what we need to learn, we need to ask and listen to customers who fall into these three sort of categories, right? Number one, they are paying customers, stands to reason, right? We want to learn from customers who are paying us and that arguably are getting continued value from our products. So have paid us ideally, twice, three times, at least a few times that we know that we're getting continued value. Also, they're happy with your product as it is today. So I often describe this as your customers who you would have to pry your product out of their cold, dead hands. It's kind of gruesome, although we're near Halloween, so maybe it sort of fits. But the idea here is that we want to help you get more of these types of customers, right? Your happy customers. And then the other criteria in general that we'll be looking for when trying to figure out which of your customers we should learn from is those customers who have gotten value recently enough that they remember what life was like before. So in general, we say anywhere between, your customers who you acquired in the last 3 to 6 months. We can go a little bit longer than that if need be, but the idea is that we want them to have a memory of the pain and the problem that you helped them solve. And so generally, you don't want to go to your customers that have been around for a couple of years because they're going to start, filling in answers and telling you what they think you want to hear, as opposed to having that real memory, right? Our memories tend to fail us. So in this case of LifeLapse, there's a few hundred customers that fell into these 3 categories. And so off we went. So the next thing that we need to do is discover, why did these amazing customers choose our product rather than all of the other options that were available to them? And for that, we're going to rely on the jobs to be done framework. So if you're still relying on demographic data to think about your customers, then you may not be familiar with this comparison. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, though. What do these 2 men have in common? Like almost everything, right? They're the same age. They're both wealthy, self-employed, live outside of and spend a ton of time in London, love international travel, dogs, sports cars, fine wines. They both have children. They've both been married and remarried. They have a ton in common. And so we don't really want to rely on demographic data to learn, from our customers. It's not a helpful way to sort of think about them. We prefer to use the jobs to be done framework, which is based on the theory that people hire our products to get a job done. So rather than just asking people what product do they want, we want to try to understand what are they trying to achieve. So it's essentially this idea. Some of you may be familiar with this. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. It's the essence of what we're trying to get to, right? They buy what our product enables them to do. They buy a better version of themselves. And so now let's look at the process that we use to find out what that is. So we are going to use, in the case of LifeLapse, we were able to use a survey. So is a survey will it be as high quality as running interviews? Absolutely not. But if you are in a position to be able to run surveys, they can be really, really effective, and it can be really, really quick. It can take just 2 weeks. Send out an email with a survey, and get responses back with a couple of follow-up emails inside of 2 weeks. Is absolutely realistic. The goal for the surveys, though, is that we want to get about 25 to 50 open text responses, which means we need to typically send this to about 300 to 500 customers. So if you're in a situation where you don't have 300 to 500 customers, either because you're earlier stage than that, or you're in the enterprise space, you're going to use a similar process to this. You're just going to be doing it in interview format with about 10 to 15 interviews. So again, about 25 to 50 responses from surveys, meaning you'll want to send about 300 to 500 out, or run about 10 to 15 interviews. This is an example of the email that we use to send the survey. I'm going to include this email template and the survey template in a link at the end. So you can all grab a copy of that. But essentially, this is the idea that we reached out to LifeLapse's best customers that fit into those categories, and we went ahead and asked them some questions. So again, if you're doing interviews, you're going to be asking the same types of questions because we're trying to learn the same things. So I'm going to run through each of the questions just to sort of help illustrate what is it that we're learning and trying to learn from these customers, right? So prior to using our product, how were you solving this problem? This question, the responses to this question will give you a picture of what life was like before. So what solution are you asking your customers to switch away from? What solution are you asking them to fire in order to hire yours? This is probably the best and most important question of the entire survey. When did you realize you needed something like us? What was going on in your world, right? So this one gets you that critical insight into that trigger moment. And you can imagine how many doors sort of open up for you when you understand, this for your customers. I mean, marketing lives in this space, but also this is the problem space that you live in. Really, really critical to understand this for those best customers. How did you find out about us? I don't really need to explain this one. Who did they talk to? Where did they go? Why did you decide to choose us over the other options? This question gives you your key differentiators, right? Why they should choose you over the other options. This is gold. This question, right? What deal breakers would have prevented you from choosing our product? This gives you insight into anxieties, objections, those types of things, which are very important to know. And then my other favorite question is, when you signed up, what happened that made you feel certain, that this was right for you? I mean, just think about what you can do with the answers to this question, right? This insight is incredible. Imagine actioning this across not only your marketing and your website, but your product onboarding. It's so powerful, the answers to this question. So love this one. And then, of course, now that you have us in your life, what are you able to do now that you weren't able to do before? That's that better life, that desired outcome, right? We want to help customers reach this point, of course, but also use this knowledge on our website and throughout our customer experience as that sort of promise of that better life. This is what they're going for. Now, one thing that you might notice is that, and I mentioned this already, these are all open text fields, and none of this is multiple choice. And the reason for that is that the voice of customer that you capture, if it's a survey open text field, obviously if it's an interview, you're going to record the call and transcribe it. That voice of customer is so critical. You also might be noticing, as I went through the questions, that for each customer, we have this sort of documentary of how they met and fell in love with your product. And that's super powerful. So when we have those answers, the next thing that we need to do is look for patterns. So this is an example of like a Google Sheet and an Airtable base for basically how we'll parse responses. We're going to go question by question and look for themes. Those themes are going to help us identify the different customer jobs, our customers hire our product to solve. And chances are you're going to identify a few key customer jobs. There's going to be a few, there's going to be like 2 or 3 standouts. When I say customer jobs, by the way, just as a sort of sidebar here, what we find, and if you're familiar with the jobs to be done theory, the customer job statement is a really helpful way for sort of encapsulating what these different groups, the jobs of these different groups. And so you can imagine how you would sort of apply the responses to those questions to this customer statement. And you'll likely end up with 2 or 3. So we have a decision to make because we cannot continue talking to everybody, right? We want to have really effective and resonant messaging and marketing and product experiences. And so we need to decide, right? Which one of these groups, which one of these customer jobs represents the biggest opportunity for us? And there's a few ways we can make that decision. These are just some of the criteria that we can use to make that call. So I'll explain the criteria and then I'll show you and explain what we did for LifeLabs. So understanding value, right? These are the customers that don't need convincing. They don't need much hand-holding. They implicitly understand what value your product provides. The other one, it stands to reason, right? Very obvious. Do they have a willingness to pay, a high willingness to pay? Do they understand the value of paying for a product like yours? Is there a line item in their budget already for a product like yours? Do they pay for similar types of products like yours? High willingness to pay. And then long-term potential, this could actually represent a couple things. One is that this is not a one and done problem that they have. This is likely, a problem that they'll want to solve over the long term. Also, long-term potential, you might see opportunities for expansion, right? To help them solve additional challenges after you help them solve that initial job to be done. And then probably the most important one on this list is that they have an urgent problem to solve, right? Especially now, we do not want to be selling vitamins. We want to be selling painkillers. So as much as possible, we want to identify and prioritize, if we can, those customers that have an urgent problem to solve. Those are going to be the easiest customers to sort of resonate with. You always want to be a painkiller, not a vitamin. There's a couple other criteria that you might want to consider as well. For instance, industries that you have an unfair advantage in. Another interesting one sometimes to consider is, do these customers congregate in a way that make them easy to market to? That's another one you might want to consider. But in general, this is how we would prioritize one customer job over another when we're parsing that research. And so for LifeLabs, it sort of panned out like this, right? They had there were three dominant jobs. We eliminated one quite easily. We didn't focus on that one, but then we had a decision to make between two. So the first group was newer to content creation and stop motion. They were the biggest group by far, tons of established demand already. But they were more likely to be using the tool and content for personal use versus a second group, which represented more experienced creators, smaller group, but more likely to be representing a brand or a business selling something, likely to already be paying for other content creation tools and experiencing a real pain versus just, curiosity. So we dug in with customer job, like the second customer job. So now our job is to figure out we have to identify the gaps between, them and you. Of this key group, are we even speaking this person's language? So we have to keep our mind's eye on that job to be done. Do we address that in our materials? And an easy place to start to answer that question is the homepage. So this is LifeLab's homepage when we started working with them. The messaging was very focused on speed, there's nothing inherently wrong with this homepage. I mean, it looks okay. It looks relatively good, but it was focused primarily on speed. But when we went to the actual voice of customer, right, the actual words and phrases that these ideal customers use, we have to ask ourselves, are we speaking their language or are we using our own jargon? Do we address their biggest anxieties that might be holding them back? Do we highlight the benefits and features that they care about most versus what we think they should care about? And with LifeLabs, we see that it was all about creating, creative and engaging content, right? You can see exciting and eye-catching, elevate my content, creative. We see that there's a very different focus. And so what we did was we leaned into engagement, beautiful, eye-catching. We swiped, their copy right from the voice of customer, and we still mention speed, but it's not the focus. And so you can see there's a stark contrast in the value proposition here, right, and in the messaging strategy here. And I already gave away what the results were. 93% increase in signups on the website when we updated the messaging strategy in this direction. Just remember, the CEO came to us thinking that they had an acquisition problem, right? Wanting to launch PR campaigns and influencer, style campaigns. But after a couple of conversations, a really simple survey, it was clear that the product marketing and positioning and the messaging was the real opportunity. Zeroed in on that ideal customer, lifted messaging and copy straight from the survey results. And, the results were incredible. We did it really quickly. We spent no money on trying any new channels or any marketing experiments. Similar process was used when working with Meet Edgar, identified, an ideal customer job, lifted that new messaging, 3 pages updated on their website. My favorite part about this story is that the trial to paid conversion rate increased 40%. We didn't touch anything but 3 pages on the website. So that just goes to show you what a higher quality, better product fit customer coming through the front door can do with not a big lift. Autobooks, similar style research done here. In this case, it was interviews, increased signups, but also product usage. SparkToro, Amanda spoke yesterday, I believe. Amanda was able to run with, we ran surveys for SparkToro and identify that better messaging and lifted the VOC. And she was able to update the onboarding experience and double the child to pay conversion rate for them. And they came to us, they had lots of signups, just not enough people converting into becoming customers. And so this was really, really powerful for them. I'm going to stop because I'm running into just a bunch of examples. There's lots more examples where this came from, similar with Sprout Social. So hopefully what I hope everybody is sort of picking up on from this is that top of funnel, more traffic, it's often our white whale, and we look to that for growth all too often. This is especially going to be true in 2023. Increasing revenue might actually be much closer to home than you think. Traffic is really, really expensive. Marketing experiments are super costly, take a ton of your team's time or your time. So once you've optimized your messaging and your customer experience to match your ideal customer job to be done, right? Really understand what's invaluable to them. Then when you can turn up the dial on marketing, you'll feel so much more confident that you're going to get that ROI from that marketing and that it's actually going to be worth all that effort and that investment. So the other thing that I hope too is that it's really obvious to everybody that not only is this a really actionable way to drive more signups for your product in terms of messaging, but the answers to the questions that I ran through there from your ideal customers gives you Yes, you can update your website for sure, but you can also update your product onboarding. You've got insight into what activation, meaningful activation and engagement looks like for your best customers. So you can develop KPIs and understand that more holistic customer experience for them. Opens up customer marketing opportunities, expansion marketing opportunities, and then yes, of course, awareness-focused marketing to get you more traffic, of course. As Rob mentioned, we did write a book on this topic. It's super practical, like a step-by-step guide. It is available in pre-sale right now. The print version is going to be available in early 2023, but there is a digital version available right now. And then as promised, the resources that I mentioned are available at that link in there. There's the email template and the survey questions. If anybody has any questions about running interviews and the specific interview questions, you can shoot me an email. My email address is on the slide there. If I've left anything out or you have any questions, obviously we also work with teams running sprints in this format, and that should be it from me. I have not been able to pay attention to the chat, but hopefully, I'm taking a look now and I am seeing there's a couple things in here. So Rob, I don't know if you are around and want to jump back in.
I'm around. Hello. Yeah, cool. Let's do some questions. Okay. I'm gonna start us off because I have at least 2 questions out of my own head, having seen that. I love the example of you have this survey, you learn a bunch, and then you change a headline, and it or you change all the copy, and it converts to more trials or to more purchases.
Yeah.
You mentioned that SparkToro did a similar process, but they already had people signing up for trial, and it was that they weren't converting, right? So it wasn't like you didn't change copy on a page for them. There was something around onboarding or whatever. Could you summarize, like what did you do there? Because I'm fascinated by that next step.
Yeah. So the product onboarding or product activation step, you mean? Yeah. So it's really, honestly, this type of research gives you I won't call it copy because this isn't really about copy. It's more about messaging strategy. But the other thing that this research provides you is insight into what matters to customers, which then allows you to map that to the specific parts of the product that deliver that value. And that's the tie for product onboarding and product activation. So it stands to reason too, that if you can connect what matters to customers and those sort of value themes to the specific parts of the product, yes, put that on your website for sure, but also carry through that message in your product experience. And so for SparkToro, that's what we did. We had identified those value themes, but they weren't being leveraged inside of the product when somebody signed up for started a free account with SparkToro. And so that's what the team was able to do. And I like full credit to Amanda on that. She executed like perfectly, but she was able to connect the specific parts of the product and what parts of the product to introduce and in what order. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to jump to a question from an audience member. Ben asks, if some customers have been with us for a while, a year or 2, would you recommend skipping those customers? It sounds like only new customers are the most helpful.
So this one is tricky. I would say don't do it. The reason being is that the world in which they may have made this purchase decision might be a completely different world than today. So that's true because of the pandemic, but it's also true because of the recession. And so if somebody, was making a purchase decision when we were in an economic boom, that's very different than somebody, in a recessionary market or post-pandemic. The decision-making criteria, the criteria that you needed to hit on, it was probably a little bit different. So I would recommend more recent because of that reason, but also because of the sort of recency thing that I mentioned when I was running through it, which is we want those people that remember what life was like before. And 2 years is a long time. We've stretched to 9 months, but we don't like to go that far if we can avoid it. Honestly, if there's not enough, just do interviews with your more recent customers.
Yeah. Is there, well, I have 2 more questions. One is, so we've talked about converting, you did the example of converting from they hit the page and they convert to a trial. And then we talked about SparkToro, where it's like they're in a trial and it's onboarding.
Yeah.
Have you used this to go out and find more? Like, I do want more top of funnel. Like, let's say I just have a trickle and now I know, oh my gosh, this one group really, and it's not by demographic, but it's by, the things you talked about. How do you translate that into like a marketing approach?
So do you mean for a group of customers that you don't like, for a group of customers you don't yet have,
or you only have a trickle of them.
Okay.
You know, let's say I have an audience of, 5,000 on my email list, and I have a SaaS app, and and then I've emailed all of them, and I have 50 customers, and it's like, oh my gosh, this one segment really gets a lot. Like, what do I do next? Like, do I run Facebook? I'm just curious if you have done that before.
Yeah, I mean, it happens a lot, right? Where it's kind of the same process where you figure out, oh, these are actually our highest value customers. These are the customers that we want more of, and they represent, a subset of our existing customer base. I would say talk to those specific customers. Mm-hmm. And when you ask this style of question, you're going to get a ton of insight into, where they were when they realized they wanted to solve this problem, who they talked to, where they go to, and then you can sort of follow that that path and go down those rabbit holes and learn more about that space. We use SparkToro, not to SparkToro all over this, mm-hmm. but SparkToro is a great tool to do that. But the source of where you're looking should be based in those customers, not in people who, may have an interest in your product or may one day be interested in paying for your product. You should always prioritize those customers that are already validated as, getting value and have a willingness to pay versus audience research. Now, there's scenarios where you may not have any customers in that segment, in which case your only choice is to do audience research. But as long as you have even a handful, I would absolutely recommend start by getting on, a call with them, asking this style of questions to them. And then after that, going out into the world, so to speak, and to those watering holes to learn more about them.
Yeah, very nice. Matthew has a question for you. He asks, mm-hmm. How would you approach a product that solves different problems for different user groups? Yeah, complicated. Don't do that. Is that how you'd approach it?
I need more information. Yeah. Different problems for different products. So that sounds like two different products to me, right? Borderline. I mean, I have worked with a company in exactly this situation recently, where it was two very unique products, but they were and two different plans. And actually, through the research, we realized only one of them was bringing people through the front door. Only one of them actually, represented a bigger opportunity. And in truth, one of the products represented the best sort of go-to-market motion, and the other product represented a great expansion opportunity post-acquisition for that first problem, so to speak. Does that make sense? I don't know if that answers this question. Obviously, I would need more.
Yeah, you kind of have to dig in and tell us more.
Yeah.
So, Gia, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that's our last question of the day, and hope to connect with you soon.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rod.